All right. Thank you. So Iran suggested that we start this celebration off with a panel discussion, and it turns out that it's more of a presentation than a panel discussion. However, Iran has played a critical role in handling the technicalities of setting up the Zoom meeting and sending out electronic invitations. And on top of that, he's agreed to cover a portion of the presentation. So thanks so much for that, Iran. I'd like to thank Noma Nash's McKissack 100 Celebration Committee. We've done a lot of work thus far, and I have a lot more to work on to continue to celebrate the McKissacks. The committee members are Ron Thompson, Charlie Green, C.J. Amlin, Carol Thompson, J.Set Harris, Melvin Gill, Michael Green. And this is one of the best committees I've ever worked with. I have several other people to thank for helping me pull this presentation together. And in the interest of time, I'll share this list with you visually. So I had a bunch of folks helping me gather information and images. And I'm showing their names now. And then I had several groups and individuals to help me get the word out about this presentation. And their names are coming on the screen. Next. If you all would, if you all would, if you have any questions, please put those in the chat box, and we'll try our best to answer them, and we'll try to answer them between each speaker. This is our agenda for the next 45 minutes to 60 minutes that will follow. I'm going to cover the family genealogy, education, and careers up through the first three generations, and then I'll turn it over to Miss Linda, who is going to cover DeBerry and Leatrice. Ron's going to cover Cheryl and Daryl McKissack, and then we'll come back and we'll look at some projects, and I'll cover some miscellaneous things that were not would not fit into the other categories. Family genealogy. So the history of McKissack and McKissack begins with Moses McKissack. Moses, which is his anglicized name, was a West African Ashanti tribesman who was captured on the Gold Coast of Ghana and transported across the Atlantic Ocean and sold in Charlotte, Carolina to a builder, William McKissack. And this happened around 1790. Moses married a Cherokee Indian woman named Miriam, another anglicized name. Moses and Miriam produced 14 children, the ninth of whom was Moses II, also known as Gabriel. Now, Gabriel and his second wife, Dolly, were the parents of 7 sons. And so I have some photographs here of the family. The top photograph is of the family, and here's Moses. I don't know if you can see my arrow or not, but Moses is on the far left there in the front. And this is Gabriel Moses, the dad. And then, and so on this particular day, in 1903, they had just celebrated that a historical marker was placed on the corner of Childers Street and Highway 31 in Pulaski, near where Moses lived. And this was to honor great Gabriel Moses. I have highlighted in red the 2 brothers that we are celebrating, Moses McKissack III and Calvin Lumpert McKissack. So the second photograph is still the family. This is in 1917, and this is shortly after the brothers had opened their firm. And here again, we have Moses III in front, and then Calvin Lumpsford McKissack. Moses III married Miranda P. Winter, and they were blessed with 6 sons. Lewis Winter, an architect, and actually the 3 of the sons were architects. I don't have a picture, but I was able to find birth dates and dates of death.
Lynn, I think you froze. Linda, are you seeing the same thing?
Leatrice McKissack. And Leatrice and Dee Berry were blessed with 3 daughters, Andrea, who is the oldest, and then there were the twins, Cheryl and Daryl. And so today we have Daryl McKissack and Cheryl McKissack, and they are currently running businesses carrying forward the McKissack's name in design and construction. So now we'll go through and talk about the education of the first 3 generations. So as a slave, Moses the First learned carpentry and building skills, and it's believed that Moses may have learned many related skills in West Africa before being enslaved. And his son, Moses Gabriel, or Moses II Gabriel, learned carpentry and building skills from his father, Moses. And Moses III gained hands-on experience working alongside his father, Moses, and his brother. So now Moses III did attend a public school. However, he dropped out of Pulaski High School in 1890. And this was a year shy of him graduating, and he did this to go apprentice with a local white architect named James Porter. And so for 5 years, Moses III prepared construction drawings and was sent to job sites to build what he had drawn. Beyond learning from family, apprenticeships, and on-the-job training, Moses studied and learned and earned a certificate of architecture from the International Correspondence School in Scranton, Pennsylvania. 2 notes about this correspondence school. One, it's still in operation. It operates under the name ICS Learn, and it provides online courses, and it operates out of the UK. And secondly, at the time that Moses III took this course from this company, the school roughly had 1 in 27 Americans taking courses at this time. So it was a pretty big operation. So that was Moses' education, and now we've got Calvin. Calvin took a little different route. Calvin was exposed to building construction working alongside his father and his older brother, Moses. And by the way, Moses was 15 years older than Calvin. So Calvin attended the Barrows School in Springfield, Massachusetts for 3 years. Couldn't find much history on this school. I do have 2 photographs. It's a photograph of the school at the top, and then there's a photograph of the soccer team at the bottom. Now, maybe this was a boarding school, or maybe Calvin lived with family members while he attended the school, because it was pretty far away from where his family was living. And then the photograph on the bottom would imply that this school, it looks like it's a majority white school. However, it did appear that they allowed Negro students to attend. So following his studies at the Barrows School, Calvin attended Fisk University from 1905 to 1909. And subsequently, Calvin also received a certificate in architect, or let's say he earned a certificate in architecture from the International Correspondence School in Scranton, Pennsylvania. All right, so now we're going to cover the vocations and careers of the three Moseses and Calvin. So as a slave, Moses the first learned carpentry and building skills from William McKissack. We've said that before, but it bears repeating. Moses started out as a slave in North Carolina and was able to purchase his freedom in Tennessee. On a radio show in New York called The Breakfast Club, Cheryl McKissack tells a story of how her great-great-grandfather, and that would have been Moses the first, donated 365,000 bricks to go on a mansion for a wealthy family in Tennessee. She did not tell the full story, but it's implied that Moses the first gaining his freedom is somehow tied to him donating those bricks. And so the mansion still stands. It was built for the Cheers family, and it's still standing in Spring Hill, Tennessee. The Saturn Corporation owned the mansion at the time of that interview with Cheryl. So continuing the family tradition, Gabriel Moses started his contracting business in Pulaski in 1986. The same year the Civil War ended, and coincidentally and ironically, the same year and place that the Ku Klux Klan was started. Now, Gabriel's son, Moses III, started his career by dropping out of school, 1 year short of graduating. We said that before, but it's interesting to me. So dropping out of school and going straight to work would not have had the same negative impact career-wise as it would have if done today. So he started his career as an apprentice, and today architects in training are called interns instead of apprentices. And your typical intern would have had some college training. Upon completing his apprenticeship, Moses worked as a construction supervisor at Bell Rolling and Riversburg's Mill. He also prepared shop drawings for B.F. McGrew and Pittman and Patterson. Neither one of those businesses are anywhere to be found. I couldn't find anything about them on the website. As time went on, Moses III independently built houses in Pulaski, Mount Pleasant, and Columbia, Tennessee, and in Athens and Decatur, Alabama. He gained an excellent reputation as a home builder. In 1905, Moses McKissack III relocated to Nashville to work as an architect builder. Moses III's first documented client was Granbury Jackson, who was Vanderbilt University's Dean of Architecture and Engineering. Granbury, who was from Mount Pleasant, Tennessee, which is a stone's throw away from Moses's hometown, Pulaski, asked Moses III to come to Nashville and to build his home. Moses built that house and houses for several other Vanderbilt University faculty. Unfortunately, the house that Moses built for Granbury has been demolished. In April 9th, 1921, the state of Tennessee enacted a registration law for architects and engineers. Shortly thereafter, the Tennessee State Board of Examiners for Architects and Engineers were found to facilitate registration and to safeguard the public. To solidify their professional standing, Moses III and Calvin, who joined the firm in 1922, submitted credentials to be licensed as architects by the newly formed board. Now, during my research, I've seen two different accounts of how the two brothers were able to attain their licenses. Both accounts testify that racial prejudice threatened to stand in the way of the brothers achieving their goal of being licensed. Both accounts say that in the end that Moses and Calvin were in the first class of licensed architects in the state of Tennessee. The two accounts differ in that one speaks of Moses III and Calvin being grandfathered in, as they were able to document and verify having been in practice a certain number of years before the registration laws in Tennessee were enacted. The other account says that Moses and Calvin were allowed to sit for the exam because the board didn't believe they would pass the exam, but they did pass the exam, and the rest is history. So Moses McKissack III received certificate number 117, and Calvin McKissack received certificate 118. And these two original certificates hang in Cheryl McKissack's office in New York today. So for Calvin's career, after finishing school and his education at Fisk University, he started a practice in Dallas, Texas in 1912. In Dallas, Calvin designed numerous churches and schools for the Negro community for 3 years. And after the 3 years, he returned to Nashville in 1915 and taught architectural drawing at Tennessee Agricultural and Industrial State Normal School for 3 years. And they called it Tennessee State A&I back then. After teaching at Tennessee State A&I, Calvin went on to become the Director of Industrial Arts at the department, the Director of the Industrial Arts Department at Pearl High School. And he advanced his career in advancing his academic career. Calvin became the first executive secretary of the Tennessee State Association of Teachers and Colored Schools. Calvin had held that post of executive secretary until 1922, at which time he resigned to join his brother as a partner in an architectural firm. That firm became known as McKissack and McKissack. Moses and Calvin led the firm together for 30 years. In the 1940s, Calvin McKissack acquired architectural licenses in Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, Florida, and Mississippi. After his brother's death in 1952, Calvin McKissack assumed leadership of the firm and continued such leadership until his death at age 78 in 1968. Now I will turn the presentation over to Linda Wynn to share history on Leatrice and DeBerry McKissack. So Ron, tell me how to do that. Stop share.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Lynn. Your research pretty much went along with mine that I did way back in the 1970s. But when we look at DeBerry, or William DeBerry McKissack, he took over the practice after his uncle passed. And as I was looking at some of the information on DeBerry McKissack, he said that there was no doubt that he would go into the architecture business. And it's been interesting. Over the last month, I have been giving presentations on notable African-American families in Nashville. The first one were the John W. Works, of which there were 3. The second was the Suttons, for whom Sutton Griggs and Griggs Hall was named at American Baptist College. And we're talking about the McKissacks today. And I was just thinking how in each one of those cases, how the occupation or the practice was passed down from father to son to grandson. And you see that in each one of these cases. And when DeBerry took over, he managed to take the company to even higher heights. He managed to sign a contract to build a palace in Saudi Arabia. During his tenure, he increased the business. And, I think it's important that we realize that during the time that McKissack, especially the early part, we were still dealing basically with Jim Crow, Nashville or Jim Crow across the country. And for them to have, even though they did some buildings for other people, most of their buildings were in the African-American community. Quite a few of their buildings were churches. For example, Spruce Street Baptist Church is one that was done by the McKissacks. If you look at Moses McKissack III, it would be Capers Memorial. And DeBerry managed to do some international types of buildings as well. And, it was interesting during my tenure with the commission back in the late 80s, early 90s. 4 of the McKissack buildings, and this was during DeBerry's reign over the company. 4 of the buildings that they built were listed in the National Register of Historic Places. Capers was one. The Carnegie Library on Fisk Campus was another. The Morris Memorial Building is one, and the Hubbard House is another building. So DeBerry even had an understanding of wanting to make sure that some of these buildings were preserved and that future generations would be able to see what Black architects in Nashville, and especially the first Black architectural firm, not only in Nashville, but in the country, had produced. Unfortunately, when I was doing my research on the McKissack, I went around and took pictures of a lot of buildings that are no longer standing that they were heavily involved with. DeBerry stayed at the helm of McKissack until he suffered a stroke. And at that time, Beatrice McKissack came into the business. So now you see the McKissack building the firm going from leadership by men to leadership by women. And, Leatrice's story is really amazing in that Leatrice was a school teacher. She taught at Mose McKissack School, elementary school, and I believe her subject was math. And to all of a sudden be thrust into this business and trying to make a decision. Now, the board of directors wanted her to sell the business. But Leatrice, for anyone that knows her, is a very strong personality. If she decides that there is something that she can do, you can't stop her. So one of the stories that her daughters tell when they were going through those negotiation process, I think Leatrice pulled out a small bottle of, I forgot whether it was bourbon. I think it was bourbon. And her daughter said, "Mother, what are you doing?" And she said, "I'm getting fortified." So in other words, she was preparing herself for the fight. And needless to say, they did not sell the firm. Leatrice ran the firm for several years with the assistance of her daughters. And during that time, one of the big projects that I remember that she had was the National Civil Rights Museum in Memphis. And I remember that in particular because our office was involved with that program. And it was also with the State Museum. And, I never did really say too much. my director knew that I had written on the McKissacks. I don't think that he knew that I knew the McKissacks, but it was a source of pride to see Leatrice take that project and complete it the way that she did. That was one of the highlights of the projects that I specifically remember her working on. There were also other projects, for example, at Fisk University, Tennessee State. There was some, and not to mention the projects that eventually her daughters took over. So, you know, when you look at a company that had been under male domination, if you will, or male leadership, and then all of a sudden to see the women rise up, and this is, you know, about the time where women are beginning to use their voice and be in those spaces that had previously, to some degree, been denied, especially in positions of leadership. And when you're talking about a field, from my perception, and then you can correct me if I'm wrong, there aren't many females in that field. So to see her take over and run the company, successfully run the company. And today, when you look at the company is under the leadership of her daughters, of DeBerry and Leatrice's daughters. And they have done great things and done a lot of very interesting projects. The name of McKissack and McKissack has been around for almost 100 years. If you look at the daughters of the twins, as I used to call them, because they used to go to my church, Daryl and Cheryl, they are also interested in the architectural business. So from my perspective, when you look at families, old families in Nashville like that, it seems as though one generation passes their interest and skills, if you will, on to the next generation, be it first, second, and third, as with the Works, John W. Works, who preserved the spirituals, or if it was Allen and Sutton Griggs, who had an interest not only in the ministry, but in education and publications and starting publishing firms, to the McKissacks, who were in the building trades. Lynn, you mentioned the 6 sons of Moses McKissack III. Each one of those sons are a part of the building trades.
Right.
So, you know, you can see that being passed on from generation to generation to generation. And I just think it's something that I wonder if modern day families, if you will, are passing on, or do we encourage our children to go into fields different than what we do? So William DeBerry McKissack passed suddenly in Washington, D.C. And that was when his wife, Leatrice Buchanan McKissack, took over the building, the firm. And today the firm is being ran by the daughters. So, you know, it's interesting when you look at that legacy that goes all the way back to the Ashanti tribe with Moses the First, and how it has come down through generation to generation to generation. And from the way it looks like it may continue through future generations of McKissacks.
Okay, can you all hear me? Well, thank you very much, Linda. We're gonna pass it on to Aran. Aran, I think I've lost control of everything. So are you controlling the slideshow now, or what's going on?
No, you still have it.
Okay, let me see what I've got here then. Next slide. Okay. All right, we'll hand it over to Aran to talk about Cheryl and Daryl.
Lynn, can you share your screen?
Yes, I think I can. Give me a second here. Settings.
I think down at the bottom, the box says share screen.
Okay, give me a second. Oh, there it is. I'm sorry. Okay,
you're
here we
fine.
are. Okay, here we go. Let me get the slide presentation back up. I had to shut it down so I could see. All right, so we've got the slide presentation started. Just a second here. Slide. Okay, I think we're ready, Ron. Can you see it?
I can.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for coming, and I appreciate your time. My name is Ron Thompson. I am a member of Noma Nash. I also sit on the executive board as parliamentarian, and I am a project manager with Moody Nolan here in Nashville, Tennessee. My topics to cover is the 5th generation of the McKissacks, which are the daughters, Cheryl and Daryl. But I also want to mention too that they have an older sister, Andrea. And so you'll get a little bit of information about her, but she was also, or I believe now is, a retired engineer. So they all went into some form of the built environment as an influence from their parents. Pictured here, you see D. Barry in his office there, surrounded by his daughters. Andrea, the oldest, I believe, is sitting there in the black shirt. And then the twins, don't get me to tell you which one's which in this picture. Cheryl and Daryl are standing up in the blue and in the pink. And then below, you see the picture of the mother, Leatrice, in the middle, with Cheryl on the left and Daryl on the right. Next slide. Well, Cheryl and Daryl were born May 15, 1961 in Nashville, Tennessee, to their parents, Dewberry and Leatrice McKissack. Story says that they grew up on the campus of Fisk and Tennessee State University. Their grandfather, Leatrice's father, was a dean, and their grandmother was a professor. So they spent a lot of time on the college campus there at Fisk and Tennessee State. Their father, which you've heard about already, D. Barry, was an architect, and story says that they spent some of their summers there in his office as summer interns as they grew up. They also tell a story that during the summer, or when they were younger, their father would take them to the office and he would have them trace drawings that he had worked on, and all the way down to the fine details. And then he would make sure that they were able to make it home for lunch or dinner, whichever one the mom had said. When they grew up, they decided that they wanted to attend. Can you go back 2 slides, Lynn? They decided that they wanted to attend an Ivy League school. At the time when they were in secondary school, they were going to a private school at the time, and so they were listening to all their friends talk about where they were going to go to college, and they thought Ivy League was where they were going to go. And in talking with their father about their selection, their father said, "That may be fine, but if you want me to pay for it, I'm only paying for Howard University." So Howard University was a school that both Cheryl and Daryl chose to attend. At Howard University, they both majored in civil engineering. Cheryl graduated with a master's degree in civil engineering, and Daryl graduated with a bachelor's degree in civil engineering. After graduation, they both started their working careers, Cheryl in New York and Daryl in DC. when story says that when they were graduating that same day, after seeing all of his daughters there together, that's when DeBerry had his stroke. Was right before their graduation. And so that's when their mother, Leatra, stepped in and started taking over the business of McKissack and McKissack. At that time, the mother was leaning heavily on her engineering daughters to help her kind of get a handle around the business and understand exactly what she needed to do and understand about the business of architecture and engineering. So both of them having all three of them actually having gone through engineering and understanding kind of the business side of it, she leaned heavily on it. And Cheryl tells a story that she would fly from New York City to Nashville to kind of help her mom look at things that were going on within the business. And then Andrea, the oldest, was also very heavily a part of the business, and even Daryl would provide input. So as Linda mentioned earlier, the transfer from their father having a stroke to going over to the women-led side of the practice, it was very much driven by the women, but they all had the background to run the company. So it wasn't new for them, and even getting the understanding of engineering and architecture at the time. At that time, Daryl was working at Howard University in the facilities group, and Cheryl was in New York City. At this time, their mother, Leatra, was running McKissack in Nashville, and she needed her help. So that's when the daughters would step in and come to Nashville to help run the family business. From their respective cities, Cheryl, in coming back and helping her mom run the business, realized that her mother was extremely stressed by the business, and realized that they really needed a better game plan. And so that's when Cheryl decided to locate an office of McKissack and McKissack in New York City. At that time, Daryl also decided that she wanted to start her own. And in DC, she started McKissack and McKissack, focusing majority on the architecture portion of the work and some interiors, and as well as some construction management side of it. But she started that in Washington, DC in 1990 with $1,000. So she wasn't already wealthy from her future endeavors, but she pulled that together in DC and started her own company. So really impressive. As they started working in Washington, DC, both of them focusing on the building and construction side, Cheryl's company, using the name McKissack and McKissack, focused more on the construction arm and less on the architectural arm. So to this day, McKissack and McKissack in New York City is the oldest minority and women-owned professional design and construction firm in the nation. The 114-year-old company mainly provides construction management services to municipalities, major companies, and government agencies operating largely in the infrastructure, transit, and healthcare and education sectors. Daryl McKissack of McKissack and McKissack in Washington, D.C., after graduating from Harvard University with a bachelor's degree in civil engineering, worked for Turner Construction and Dames and Moore. And in 1990, with a shoestring budget of $1,000, started McKissack and McKissack, and which has now grown to 170 employees with offices in Baltimore, Chicago, Dallas, Los Angeles, Miami, and Washington, D.C. And what you see on the screen, if you go to the next slide, you will see some of the projects that these firms have produced. The first slide you see there on the screen is Harlem Hospital. It is under the McKissack and McKissack, Cheryl's company out of New York City, where they were the project managers for it. And sorry, making sure I say the right, yeah, Harlem Hospital, where they provided construction management and community outreach. All right, next slide. Next, you see Wintrust Arena and MGM Casino and Resort. Wintrust was done by McKissack and McKissack out of Washington, D.C., where they were the project management and quality assurance for the 10,000 seat Wintrust Arena in Chicago, home to DePaul University Blue Demons basketball, as well as the MGM Casino, where they served as project managers for the 958,000 square foot casino resort encompassing approximately 23 acres and comprised of a 300 suite glass tower luxury hotel and casino. Next slide. Also on this slide here, you see the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture and the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial, both in Washington, D.C., was done by Daryl's company. The MLK Memorial Foundation selected McKissack as the architect of record for the Martin Luther King Memorial. It is located on a 4-acre site along the Tidal Basin in Washington, D.C., adjacent to the Franklin D. Roosevelt Memorial and on a direct line between the Lincoln and Thomas Jefferson Memorial. As architect of record, McKissack led the design build team and provided project and construction management, architecture, landscape architecture, geotechnical engineering, stormwater management, and sediment controls. So they were the lead architect and the architect of record for the MLK Memorial.
Nice.
On the museum project, McKissack provided construction and management service to assist in the development and construction of the National Museum of African American History and Culture. This long-awaited National Museum provides for the collection and study of artifacts and documents relating to African American life and for the establishment of programs relating to its life, art, history, and culture. Next slide. McKissack and McKissack of New York, Cheryl's company, is currently the firm serves as the program manager for the Terminal 1 at JFK. In this role, they oversee the design and construction of $6 billion worth of new terminal work. It is the largest project in the Western Hemisphere, the largest airport in America being built, and is the largest minority-owned, women-owned business program associated with it. Prior to this monumental undertaking, the company also worked on the Coney Island Hospital redevelopment, Harlem Hospital's Center's modernization, the Fulton Fish Market, the Studio Museum in Harlem, and projects with Metropolitan Transportation Authority, the largest transportation system in the Western Hemisphere. For that venture, McKissack oversaw the 2nd Avenue subway extension and reworking the rail system for Brooklyn's Barclays Center. The bottom picture is a proposed development in New York City. This development is an all-Black team aiming to develop the first skyscraper built by African Americans in the New York City history. It has both Sir David Ajayi, Don Peebles Group, which is a developer, McKissack, Don Peebles, and Stephen Winfork, founder of the Winfork Group, is also a member of the team. This project is situated here right behind the Jacob Javits Convention Center in New York City. And again, doing something of this monument size and stature in New York City with an all-Black development group, an arm and leg, would be powerful in and of itself by itself. So just to think about doing something of that stature in New York City is a feat all by itself. So there's a lot of history, a lot of work, but to understand that both Cheryl and Daryl have picked up the torch from their ancestors and have carried it forward in where we are today is a monumental feat. But to think that they are not only doing work, but they're thriving in some of the toughest markets in the United States: New York City, Chicago, Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, even in the West Coast in LA, is a phenomenal feat. All right, Lynn, I think that's it on my end.
We've got, these are some, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
So these are slides that we sent Iran's slides to Cheryl's office to take a look at, and they wanted us to add these two slides here. So this is Columbia University in Manhattansville expansion. So they wanted us to take a look at that. It's beautiful. Okay. All right. Do you have anything to say about this last one?
Yeah, the last slide, I just, again, I just reiterating that these are pioneers doing and have done over $1 billion worth of design and construction work and projects in the United States. That deserves to be said one more time. Doing and have done over $1 billion worth of design and construction work in the projects in the United States. It's a major feat for any company, let alone being Black women in a field that doesn't look like them. And so is a hats off to them. And one other thing, I think, we talk about their father's side and Moses II and Moses III, but we also want to, a quick story I learned too in researching them, that their mother, Leatrice, her parents, of course, were educators. Her father actually got a PhD from Harvard. And so I can only imagine, living up to the McKissack name on one side and then Leatrice's family's name on the other side when both your grandfathers are either entrepreneurs and businessmen and or then PhDs from prestigious universities such as Harvard.
Okay, I'm looking at the chat box. Whitney's asking me to put it in full screen mode.
I think if you go to the slideshow. While Lena's doing that, if anybody has any additional questions.
There looks like there's quite a few up there.
Okay.
So,
Right.
but let's see.
But please feel free to add them in the chat box.
All right, so the slideshow. And the current slide, let's see what happens. Okay.
There you go.
How does that look? All righty, so then here are the projects. And I'm gonna just progress through those. So what the McKissacks, they've done over the 100-year course of time, they've done over 6,000 projects, including the ones that of all the generations in some form or fashion, be it construction, design, project management, program management, construction management. So they've done lots of projects. And so we're only touching on just a few. And for the most part, I'm covering the generation of Moses and Calvin. And so this is their first big project or their first commission. This is the Carnegie Library at Fisk University. My understanding is that it's neoclassical in design and that it was one of the first buildings on campus. I'm trying to let's see. For some reason, I can't move forward. Oh, there we are. All right, and then this is the Turner Normal School. They designed the administrative building for that. And then this is the Roger Williams University. They did dorms for the Rogers Williams University and Lane College. And Roger Williams University now here in Nashville is called the Baptist College. This is the West resident over on Central Avenue, just kind of back behind West End near Vanderbilt University. So I'm thinking this may have been one of the homes that he did for one of the Vanderbilt faculty members. And then this is Capers Memorial Church that we've spoken of. And this is on the historical register. The design is neoclassical. It was built in 1925, and my understanding is that the McKissack family have been lifelong members there. Linda, are you a member there? You're muted.
I'm not a member there, but they were lifelong members. And if my memory is serving me correctly, some of the stained glass windows were done in memory of some of the McKissacks.
I can believe that. And then this is Fairfield Baptist Church. That's another church that they've done. And then this is the Morris Memorial Building. That's on the historic register. And so the top picture is a recent photograph. I think I actually pulled that off Google Earth or something like that. But the bottom is an actual artist rendering that I found in the Tennessean. It was a 1925 version of the Tennessean, which I thought was interesting. You can see the tracks and what you call them, the trolleys or whatever. I thought that was pretty neat. And then this is an aerial view of Tennessee State University, or back then they called it A&I, or Agricultural and Industrial School. And so this is an aerial view, and I'm pretty sure that every one of those buildings that we're looking at on that campus was designed and or built by the McKissacks. So this is early on in the campus. And this is just another building at TSU. And then these photographs here, I was able to find, I pulled these in a thing called the Special Collections over at Fisk University. They've got this amazing collection of McKissack information. They've got like 54 boxes about this size. And they have all kind of files with pictures and letters and all kind of things. They're very meticulously labeled and everything. But I was able to find these pictures, and these are all TSU pictures. It looks like this picture on the top right here is the gymnasium building. And then these pictures were sent to me by Gloria McKissack, who was married to Joel McKissack. So she is a part of the McKissack family. I forget exactly. She's in the generation with DeBerry. But she sent me these pictures, and these are newspaper clippings. The top is our gentleman standing in front of Pearl High School. Looks like a grand opening or something like that, but the bottom one is actually an artist rendering from a newspaper of the school, and the note under the drawing says it's a $285,000 school, and back then that was probably high dollar. And my understanding is that Pearl was really a state-of-the-art building at the time. And then this is the Universal Life Insurance Company. Moses McKissack was a major stockholder in this company, the Universal Life Insurance Company. And I think I read that at one time, this Universal Life Insurance Company was the largest Black-owned insurance company in the country. And so, but McKissack was the architect for this building. And as it stands now, the two gentlemen standing in the middle, that's Juan Self and Jimmy Tucker, that's Self Tucker Architects. They purchased that building, and
Mhm.
they are in that building. They fully renovated it, and they've won awards for the renovation that they've done. And then the bottom photograph is just a historical photograph of all the employees of that building, probably when it opened up, pretty close to when it first opened up. This is the home of Governor John Brown, and my understanding is that Moses III designed and maybe built this building. This is a building designed by Calvin. It's in Florida. It's a church. The top building is Washington High School. It has since been demolished, and the lower one is Cameron High School. All projects, both projects done by the McKissacks.
Lynn, Washington was not a high school, it was a junior high school.
Oh, okay. Well, and I attended Washington as a junior high school. I always
Okay.
thought that they had turned it into a junior high school, but yeah.
No,
All
it
right.
started out that way.
Right, okay, good to know. But it's been demolished.
Yeah.
And then the McKissacks garnered a national attention in 1943 when they were awarded this War Department contract to design and build the 99th Pursuit Squadron Training School. And so that was the training facilities for the Tuskegee Airmen. And then this is one of the houses, probably near Vanderbilt. I didn't get that one labeled, but it's still that neoclassical style with the kind of the standout porch and the popped up portico at the top. And then these are some more pictures that I got from Fisk University, the special collections. I have not found a record that they did this Rockefeller Hall, so maybe that was just an example. That looks like a postcard to me. But the bottom picture is the construction crew. The interesting thing is at the time there was check out the hats, no hard hats. Okay. These photographs are, I believe this is Moses. And so these are early on in the construction business. You know, they're actually got some of their equipment that's being powered by horses. And so this looks like it's at looks like a rather prominent housing area. These still from Fisk University Archives Special Collection. These are just pictures of construction at TSU. And these are some blueprints, real blueprints that I was able to get from Tennessee State University at Facilities Management. They've got a room with just drawers filled with all the drawings of every building that was built there. And so I've had the privilege of going through those drawings and pulling several drawings of the McKissacks. I've had them scanned, and we'll be using those later. The reason I pulled these though is that I just happened to notice that in the little box down at the bottom, it said Joel McKissack. And so Joel was a family member, and he did the drafting on these. And then these are additional drawings that I was able to get from Facilities Management. And I pulled these elevations of the actual buildings. And this is the Health and Physical Education building. And I think they call it Keene Hall now. And these are aerial views of the campus. The top one pretty much covers the entire campus. And my goal is to one day go and put a dot on every one of the buildings that the McKissacks designed and or built. And then the lower picture is a closer view, but that's shows pretty much just about all the buildings. All the buildings in this area were designed and built by the McKissacks. So they did a lot at TSU.
You know, Lynn, I think one of the things that's important to mention about Mose McKissack III is that he was on a housing committee that was established by Franklin Roosevelt
Right.
to look at housing issues. And one of the notable examples would be what used to be College Hill.
Right. I've got some slides in there of College
Yeah,
Hill.
it was about $1 million project.
Right. I'll talk about that later on. But and so here are some dorms on the campus, and these were all dorms that were designed by the McKissacks, and they're still standing. This is the I believe this is the nursing building. They changed the names on them. A lot of times they'll come back and give them a name of some prominent member, teacher or faculty. And then this is just to show, this is one of those buildings back in kind of one of the earlier buildings, but just the beautiful architecture. It's a beautiful campus. So this is probably the biggest project of DeBerry's. This is the Meharry Hubbard Hospital. And my understanding is that, when that particular project was in the office, it was an exciting time. There was just so many engineers and other architects working on that project. It was a big deal. And so this project the building's still there, and it's in pretty good condition. I've been over there recently. And some other bigger projects under DeBerry's reign would be the teachers' towers, or what we've called them teachers' tower, the seniors' towers. The first one is the Parthenon Tower, one on the top, and then the one on the lower picture is Hadley Park Towers. And so the McKissacks did those towers as well as a couple of others in the city, big projects. And then, of course, there's the National Museum of Civil Rights. I know I'm calling this wrong. I even worked on this project, but this was a big project in Memphis. All right, so that was all of the projects. Like I say, I only was able to touch on a few. I've got another whole book for my coloring book, so eventually we'll get more into the slide presentation. So now I do have some miscellaneous things that I'd like to cover that didn't fit into what we've talked about before. I think I would miss the boat if I didn't mention, well, first of all, let me just say that the McKissacks are an amazing family. We've figured that out already, right? They are. They just, from the very start, they've been on top of it. But I think it's really important to note that, the McKissacks, they've done a lot, but they've had lots of help from other people that weren't named McKissack. And so as I was doing some research, a few names just kept coming to mind for me. And by no stretch of the imagination, I'm not going to touch on, some of the big players that helped the McKissacks, that worked at the McKissacks. But these are the names that I came across. Well, first of all, I want to mention my friend, Claudette Tharp. I worked for the McKissacks for 5 years, relatively young. I think it was, I was in my early 20s and I worked there, and Miss Claudette was there. And she was Mrs. McKissack's right-hand lady. When I got there, Mr. McKissack had a stroke. He would come into the office some days, but he really, he wasn't working. An interesting story, though, I was just learning to, draw. I was drawing buildings, and Mr. McKissack DeBerry would come and point at stuff that wasn't right on my drawings. He couldn't tell me what it was, but he would point at it and say, no, no, no. So I appreciated him for that. But anyway, Claudette was Mrs. McKissick's right-hand woman, so to speak, and kind of a mom to us younger architects. Claudette told me that she was there a long time, because she was there when Mr. Calvin was running the place. So she was there for quite some time. So I definitely want to just mention her. And then there was a gentleman, E.T. Winder. He was, or they call him E.T. Winder. He was a licensed architect. And I tried to find some history on him, could not find anything, but over and over, anybody that I talked to about the history of architecture, the history of McKissack architecture would mention Mr. Winder. And so Mr. Winder was the guy that sat back in the back and just cranked out the drawings and did the design. And then DeBerry was up getting the deals. You know, he was kind of the businessman, is my understanding. But Mr. Winder and Mr. Ernest Davis was an engineer at the time. He was there kind of running the engineering side. And then there was Jimmy Larkin. Jimmy Larkin hired me to go work for McKissack, and then he left the week after that. But there was this period when Mr. DeBerry had the stroke, and Miss McKissack, being a very astute businesswoman, knew that she needed some people that knew what they were doing in the back room. And so Jimmy Larkin had worked there as an intern, I believe, and had gone to Gresham and Smith to work, but Miss McKissack asked him to come back and kind of oversee the back room. And so I have to mention him. And then Harold Thompson was there as well. When Jimmy left, Mr. Harold Thompson came in. For a short period of time, there was a place called McKissack Thompson. Not exactly sure, you know, how long that was, but anyway, Harold Thompson, a very talented architect, and so he helped Miss McKissack get through some of those bigger projects, mainly the museum in Memphis. They hired a gentleman, Juan Self, who actually ran the McKissack office in Memphis, to help out to do the construction administration for the Civil Rights Museum. And so I just wanted to mention those folks. And I've invited Claudette, Harold, Jimmy, and Juan. So I'm not sure who's here, but I just wanted to make sure that I mentioned those guys and Claudette. This is just the marker that I was telling you about of Gabriel Moses. That's in Pulaski. And then these are some pictures that Miss Gloria McKissack sent me. The picture in the middle is Calvin with his team, I guess the office. And I was told that this was about the time that they were awarded that project at the 99th Squadron. And then the gentleman up top, on the top picture, they're looking at plans for College Hill, which Linda mentioned earlier. Interestingly enough, it appears that the McKissacks were developers for College Hill. It turns out they owned College Hill. Mm-hmm. And I saw many little snippets in the newspapers as I was looking through that about how nice of an apartments they were. They were luxury apartments at the time. And then the bottom is, I think that's Calvin standing in front of McKissack with that in front of Pearl School. This is McKissack School. The McKissacks sold the land to the city in order for them to build that particular school. And I guess it was a pretty good price. But then this is just a picture of what a classroom looked like back then. So there is this school named McKissack after the McKissacks. Ironically, I went to McKissack. I was in the 3rd grade at McKissack when I decided I was going to be an architect. So there you go. And then these are some pictures surrounding College Hill. These are the, I think this is as College Hill is being constructed. And then this is the groundbreaking for College Hill. But it was a very nice development at the time. And then these are pictures from the special collections. Looks like College Hill, one of the units caught on fire. And then these are a couple of clippings from the newspaper. I pulled these out just to, I'll just reinforce what Linda was saying about how the McKissacks weren't afraid to go out of the country. You know, they got projects. This is a clipping about a project that they got in Haiti. And then this is about the palace that DeBerry designed for the Saudi Arabian prince, I believe it was. And then this is the medal was given to Moses by the president, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Trying to get to my slides here. And for outstanding business. And that was the Spalding Award. Linda mentioned that earlier. And I think that's all I have on the McKissacks. The very last thing that I'd like to talk about is, like I said, this is the kickoff, bumpy as it is, this is the kickoff for this celebration of the McKissacks. And so we got some other things planned. We're working on a coloring book. This will be our second coloring book. And when I say our, I mean Noma Nash. And you see a picture of children with our first coloring book. And we distributed a lot of these coloring books to metro schools. And so that is the plan for the next coloring book. The next coloring book, however, will be a 100-year commemorative coloring book with all of the images in the book being projects by the McKissacks. So we've got that well underway. The next thing that we're working on is a gallery and reception. And that is slated to happen in February to go along with Black History Month, as well as that is the actual month and year that it will have been 100 years since the McKissack brothers got their licenses. So we're working on those. We've already collected quite a few very nice drawings. TSU has been very key in allowing us to go through their drawings, and Layla and Rogers has made prints for us. And so it's just a matter of finding a location to have this gallery. We anticipate we'll have this gallery. We'll do a reception. We'll invite the McKissacks, as many that want to come. They've already said they're interested in coming. We'll have Noma Nash members as well as some other organizations. Hopefully we'll have as many McKissack former employees or alumni to attend too. So we're excited about that. It seems like a no-brainer to me that this gallery will be somewhere on the campus of TSU, but that remains to be seen. And then the final thing that we're working on is bus tours for school-age children, and we may even do bus tours for adults to see how it goes. But the goal would be to do bus tours, taking the children around the city to show them buildings that the McKissacks have designed. If the pandemic makes that so that we can't do it, we may just do walking tours from McKissack School, which is within walking distance of the campus at TSU, and there's plenty to walk around and see over at TSU. And so that's what we've got going. All right, so I'm gonna, looks like the chats, we've got several chats. Were there any questions? I'm looking. Everybody's asking about, can you fix your screen? Okay, are you recording this? We are recording this?
We did.
Yes.
Yes, we are.
Okay.
I think the only
Everybody's
thing
been
I
asking for
saw-
full screen and I didn't see it. I'm sorry, guys.
think the only thing that we saw was there's two things. Valerie put in there that she was her very first summer internship as a Tuskegee architect student was at McKissack and Thompson.
Nice. Very good.
And then Gemma O worked for McKissack and McKissack under Juan Self in Memphis.
Right. I know Gemma. I invited Gemma.
Gemma and Valerie, do you guys want to share any stories about your time at McKissack and McKissack?
Can you hear me? Can you guys hear me?
We can.
Well, I can hear it's kind of low.
Okay. Hey. Oh, okay. Yeah,
Hey.
I'm in the car. Hello, everybody. Great presentation, everybody. But let's see what I remember. I remember Leatrice, or I think we called her Leatrice. And yeah, Leatrice. And she was just the nicest. She was just like another mom to me. And she was just like, you know, going through this presentation, she was just a ferocious businesswoman. She just, you know, she wasn't an architect or anything, but she put that educator part of her to good use. So she was teaching us all, you know, even though she wasn't an architect. So it was really, really nice to work there. And I don't know if Harold must have been there when I worked there, but I don't remember Harold at that time. But it was good times, and you know, it was a great place to work and kind of get some of that history. And I had a chance to look through some of the old drawings and different things while I was there.
Right. Well, I heard Leatrice, she said she had a degree in psychology, and so she said that she used that often in her business dealings.
Yeah.
Hello,
I just want to
this
say
is Gemma.
great presentation.
Well, thank you. We'll get the
Okay.
bugs worked out and do it again. Hey,
Yep.
Gemma.
Okay.
So glad to have you here.
Hi, thank you, Lynn, for telling me about this. And actually, I passed it along to some of my fellow Howard architecture alums as well. So hopefully, I don't see too many of them on the line, but hopefully I'll be able to share this presentation with them. I actually met Juan while I was working at another architectural firm, and he stole me away from that, that firm to go and work for McKissack and McKissack. And I'm actually really glad that he did, because honestly, before I had gotten to Howard, I've never known of a Black architect. It was just something, a field I combined the loves I have of design and engineering. So that's why I decided to go into architecture. Went to Howard because of my brother, but met Juan because of another job. And like I said, through him, I learned of McKissack and McKissack. And I did meet Mrs. McKissack. I did not call Leatrice a few times when she would come into town. And I was always blown away by her business knowledge more than anything. And I just appreciate that experience I had working there.
Right. She was
And
definitely a businesswoman.
in turn, I was also stolen away from McKissack by another architectural firm. So Juan has not let me let that down yet. So
Yeah. Well, I would agree, Mrs. McKissack, and I certainly called her Mrs. McKissack. And honestly, the only reason I was calling these gentlemen, I'd call them all Mr. McKissack, because I was just trying to keep straight the different generations. But yeah, Mrs. McKissack was definitely, and still is probably, a sharp businesswoman. I've had a chance to talk to her a couple of times over the last few months, just getting her ready for what we're working on. So they're remarkable.
I think I may still have the Black enterprise issue when they were profiled, when the firm was profiled in it. from the
Yep.
early 80s.
All right, guys. Well, it's coming up on 8 o'clock now. Certainly appreciate you all attending. I apologize for all the technical difficulties. We'll get it worked out. We'll do this again eventually and get some bugs worked out. But so happy that you were able to come, and hope you learned some things about the McKissacks that you didn't know. Ron, you got anything?
No, I was just going to say thank you, Lynn, for spearheading all of this. Thank you, Linda, for jumping in and adding your spice on top of it. And thank you, everybody else, for even coming out and listening tonight. We hope you guys enjoyed it. It will be recorded. We'll figure out a way to put it on our Noma Nash platform, and then seeing how we can share it out to other entities that want to use it and share it too. So thank you all.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks for all the love, guys. Appreciate you. Thank you. Thank you, Linda.
You're
Thank you.
welcome.
Hey, we gotta start looking to make sure that no more of their buildings get demolished.
Yeah, let's start with Morris Memorial,
Okay.
the only building in the Black Business District that's left.
Yeah. Okay. Let's
All
talk
right.
about it.
All right. Take
All right.
care.
Thanks again.
Mhm.
Sign out.